I'd like to offer the prayer for the diocese from the Book of Common Prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. O God, by your grace, you have called us in this diocese to a goodly fellowship of faith. Bless our clergy and lay leaders, our congregations, and all our people. The word may be truly preached, truly heard, your sacraments faithfully administered and faithfully received. By your Spirit, fashion our lives according to the example of your Son, and grant that we may show the power of your love to all among whom we live, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So as we begin this evening, I know I'm aware of three things we want to make sure we discuss. The first is the budget. The next is our constitution and canons, the work of the committee there, and finally received resolutions. There may be other matters, but as we get underway, I'm going to turn now to our diocesan treasurer, Mr. Jonathan Gloucester, and ask him to share with you the budget and our the current state of the budget that we are preparing for the diocesan convention.
Okay, thank you, Bishop French. And as usual, I need my sharing.
Sure, I will get that to you right away. I'm going to ask Morel going forward to make sure that you have the capacity to share as
Okay.
well. I may not be able to do this. Pat, could you make Jonathan a co-host so he can share?
I just allowed everyone to share. I will set up the co-host as well.
Okay. Thank you. I have it now. All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to start out with our proposed 2025 budget. And I'll say the Budget and Finance Committee has been working since August, sort of the third week of August, on putting together a budget for 2025. We've reviewed budget requests from commissions and ministries and task force, and looked at also requests, expenditures for other major items, and also reviewed staffing proposal for 2025. So this budget we present now, we did present to Diocesan Council earlier today. I will say we're still tweaking a few things as we learn new information over the last couple of days. So this is our preliminary proposed budget for 2025. We'd like to present it for feedback from the diocese at large, and our plan is to make sure we have it finalized before the November convention. At the latest, Diocesan Council's next meeting in November. So going forward, the column all the way here to the right is the proposed budget, and far left was the budget approved from 2024. So you can see any comparisons between the two. On the first line, 1B is projected March submission income. You'll see at this point we're projecting a little more than $3 million in March submission income. We've gotten responses by a little more than 50% of the congregations on their 2025 March submission. We used to say pledge, but we like to say what their offering would be for 2025. I'll say based on those returns, we've got over 39 congregations out of all of those 131. We basically have responses from 71 or 72, and 39 of those have committed to 100% or more they're asking, and several of those have committed to increases in their March submission giving from 2024. We are still waiting on additional ones to come in to get a final number, but part of the Budget and Finance Committee, we did project what the income would be from March submission, and we're projecting close to $3 million, and that's based on what we've got in and the trends that show some increases. And those we didn't receive, we looked at what they gave last year and projected what their giving would be this year. Either they gave they're going to be giving what they gave last year, or we're also looking at potential for some increases for those that are still outstanding. We asked that folks who were assessed 10% or more that they try to get to 10%, even if they didn't get to the full asking. And if they didn't get to 10%, we're asking congregations to have some small level increase, 2, 3, or 4% over what they gave last year. If that holds true, we'll be able to get to that $3 million number. And the other projections in terms of trust income based on dividends and interest and other designated income to the operating fund, just about where they were last year, a slight decrease on the trust income just because we have fewer shares to draw down on. And that puts us at a projected drawdown of $419,204 from our trustee grants. When I explain the expenses, you'll see how we got to that number. Any questions so far? Okay, going down to our expenditure side, the amount budgeted for mission congregations this year is $375,000. That's based on the recommendation of the Board of Missions and was approved by Diocesan Council at their September meeting. So we use that for the budget number. It's less than what was budgeted for last year, but the Board of Missions worked closely with all the mission congregations to try to find an equitable way to deal with the funds that we have available. We are challenged this year on what we have available to give for mission support. The second line, line 20, is our support for the Episcopal Church. This is to the National Church. Many of you may have recalled last year we budgeted $300,000 from an asking of $600,000. In actuality, the National Church came back with approval for us for $400,000 in 2024, which we are on track to paying that $400,000 to the Episcopal Church in 2024. For 2025, we're budgeting $500,000, projecting that a little more than $600,000 will be their asking, but we're projecting $500,000 and going to present that to the National Church for consideration, rather than the full $6,000. We hope over the next year or two to get that back up to what the full asking is. In terms of budget for our social and ethnic ministries, the Budget and Finance Committee went through budget requests for all of those areas. In most cases, we kept expenditures where they were last year, or a little less than that is. Many of the commissions did submit in requests for funds, and we got it close to that. One change, we did decrease in a couple of areas just because we were trying to find ways of saving. The Global Development Goals Task Force requested $15,000. We decreased that to $10,000. That's primarily a matching grant for matching funds for funds raised by congregations for global development support. So we did allow them to do matching, but did work with a reduction of $5,000 in that area. The amount for Cathedral is the same, the $150,000. For Diocesan Communications, we had budgeted $24,200 last year. You'll see the number is $40,000 this year. Actually, the total communications cost is actually less than it was last year. You'll see when I get to staff position that we had a staff position budgeted for social media and evangelism. We no longer have that position budget for 2025. We increased the total program amount for Diocesan Communication to $40,000 because we plan on using some of those funds to bring in outside consultants or technicians to help us with some of the technical services needed for update and maintenance of our communications of media, primarily our website. Other areas in here that pretty much stayed the same. We did see a decrease for Episcopal Church women. Their cost, given their current way of their major events, are virtual now. We thought the $750 would still allow them to do that. And the Reparations Commission requested a decrease from the $43,850 to $34,650. We did grant that, so they're down a little bit, trying to help out with other expenses in diocese. And the Commission on Black Ministries, the same. Another area of decrease was for young adult and youth activities, primarily the youth activities. We've had budgets as high as 50,000 for that, but our actual expenditures have been much less than that, closer to about the $15,000 to $20,000 range. What we did here is we decreased that budget from 30,000 to 15 to 50. A large portion of that decrease was money that was set aside for youth activity grants through the convocations. We haven't had a lot of those grants, but we did allow funds so that each convocation would have some funds available to 2 grants for youth activities at the convocation level. Next area is in congregational development, kept that budget the same, and pastoral response, which typically is responding to crisis or urgent needs within our congregations. If they have specific issues, there's some funds set aside to support maybe consultants or specialists to help them with crisis response to very critical activities going on in their congregations. Congregational ministries, most of these will remain at the same level they were in 2025. 2024, they remain that in 2025. Going down to ministry development, the Committee on Priesthood, we're budgeting 10,000 for 2025. That was 31,750 in 2024. The reason for the decrease is the way we're doing our priesthood. Committee on Priesthood is operating is some of the costs are borne by the candidates for priesthood, and we've got new ways and a new approach to doing that, which results into a savings. We think the 10,000 will be online what was actually spent in 2024. So decision was made to go with a budget of 10,000 for that. The other areas in here stayed pretty much the same, except for Fresh Start and Transition Ministries. We decreased those somewhat, but we still believe we can allow them to continue to support at the same level they were at 2024. In the area of deacons, the School of Ministry is a big change there. You'll see we went from 37,200 to 9,000. A large portion of that, and this is the honoring the request from the School of Ministry. A main result of the savings is the way they do their class instruction now. We're partnering with the Diocese of Pennsylvania to provide instruction. It's still virtual classroom instruction, but it's a significant savings to what we had in the past. So just restructuring that program and it has allowed us to reduce the cost for School of Ministry program. In the Committee on the Diaconate, slight decrease in that area as is with the Deacon Council, a slight decrease in that area, but we're hoping that again the expenditures will be close to what their 2024 expenditures were. Another area, diocesan gatherings. For Diocese Convention, we're budgeting 10,000. We're only having one convention this year, and based on expenditures historically over the last 2 in-person conventions, it's projected that we can do the convention within that $10,000 budget. Budget for Clergy Conference, slight decrease in that, and Lay Leader Conference, leaving that at the level that was in 2024. Going down to within the larger church, House of Bishops and Lambeth Conference, budget's the same, curing funds for Lambeth Conference. Line 412, General Convention. There, we had convention this year in 2024, back in July. What we're doing now is we're going to start accruing expenditures over the next 3 years for the next General Convention, and we decided to put in a budget of 30,000. Typically, that had been 25,000 a year, based on the actual expenditures and projection of the next General Convention. We decided to use $30,000 as a budget figure for accruing costs for the next General Convention. Programs and covenants, most will stay the same. The changes are in conveying diocese. We went from 9,500 budget in 2024. Finance and Budget reduced that to 5,000. A couple of factors go into play there. One, travel to the companion diocese, given conditions on the ground now are challenging at this point. But we also, given our financial condition, we wanted to make sure we had an effective program with the companion diocese while still making sure we dealt with our financial situations here. So the $5,000 is available to the companion diocese commission to spend as they see fit to help the needs of the diocese and the 2 dioceses in Ecuador that we support. Next area, we'll get first any questions on this first section of the budget before I get into diocesan staff. Okay, the next area of the budget is diocesan staff. What we've done there is across the board on staff that are on staff through the middle of this year, we've recommended an increase of cost of living increase of 2.5%, which is in line with the Social Security cost of living increase recommended for 2025. So we are able to budget in increase for our ongoing staff. So the first line is for bishop's salary. We did increase that from where it was last year, from 206 to 211. But also over the last week, Standing Committee has looked at bishop compensation, and we'll be making a recommendation to bring that more online with the norms of bishop compensation throughout this region. We'll say one thing is that we discovered that some of the compensation for Bishop Stokes was done off budget. Some of the housing compensation was off budget, wasn't in our budget. So we're committed this year to update the budget to reflect the actual cost, and you'll see what we've done in that area. But based on last year's compensation, we're projecting a budget of a 2.5% increase, a budget of 248,000. We've also made some adjustments in professional allowance and transportation for the bishop, given the fact that she has a very extensive visitation schedule ongoing and working to catch up on that over the next year or so. So bishop, the base bishop compensation was 248, but given the fact that there's a projected adjustment for market conditions for bishop compensation, we've also budgeted another 40,000 on what we call Episcopal support, either an assistant bishop or use that to increase compensation to market levels in there. So we've set aside some money in the budget to deal with that. Those numbers will be finalized over the next week or so, and working with the Standing Committee who makes the final recommendations on bishop compensation.
Thank you. Jonathan, can I speak to that briefly, as I feel like I ought to? It is my compensation, and it's a big number. One of the things we have discovered in the past month, and at first it was sort of shocking and awful, but in hindsight it is exactly the same as many of our other discoveries, is that the number that Bishop Stokes was compensated at was not the number in the budget. I don't think that he was aware of the discrepancy. I want to be really clear on that. But the number in the budget, our budget number, did not match other compensation numbers for bishops in similar situations. And when the Episcopal Compensation Report came out for 2023, and it's available online on the Church Pension Fund website, it was clear that we were quite off. But Bishop Stokes's compensation was not off. What happened was that when I was brought in, not only was the number the Standing Committee had voted on not the number that was given to me, but also they were making that decision based on incomplete information about where the compensation was previously and what might be an appropriate number. We've been trying to do work to get people across the staff and clergy across the diocese and lay employees as well into places where they have appropriate compensation that seems to be fair and reflect what the positions would normally be elsewhere. And when I brought that to the Standing Committee, with the data and the conversation, I think the Standing Committee was very clear and they were supportive on that. I'm grateful for the support. This is not about a raise or anything. It's about looking at where the numbers should have been, and about our need to be mindful of how we support everyone in our system I'm grateful for the support, but I also recognize that we have a responsibility to do that elsewhere, and you'll see some of that further down in the staffing report. I'll answer any questions people might have around that. I recognize it's a significant number, and we want to be transparent, and we want to be truthful, and we want to be accountable to you. So. Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out via email as well as in this on the budget. Jonathan, without seeing any questions, you might want to reshare, and we can continue with the other staff positions. And
Sorry about that, hit the wrong button.
when it comes to the point where we have the two positions that do need a bit of a change, I'm happy to talk to that when we get to that budget line. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, actually, the next line's coming up is for canon of the ordinary. Oh yeah, and just again verifying that is that in terms of this adjustment in the bishop compensation, the money was being spent. It was just being being shown as not a budget item. And as you know, we've been challenged over the last few months to sort of find costs coming out of the operating budget and covering other expenses and funds coming into the operating budget not being transferred over to the right place. So that's one of the things we've learned is that we've got to be clear in where the compensation is coming from and not sort of have special funds or special areas we'll be pulling from. So that's one of the reasons why we have the 40,000 budgeted in here potentially for additional compensation in that area. Another area, the next staff line is canon of the ordinary. The current salary was 105, and we budgeted the increase of 2.5%. Made some adjustments in transportation and in this case the transportation and continuing education was slightly reduced. But one line in there we'll see adjustment for industry standard. This is an area where again in this position we're looking at what is the actual market compensation level among other dioceses in our region, similar sized dioceses and similar area, and it's projected that it could be up to $20,000 adjustment might be needed to bring that position up to market levels among other dioceses. Work is going on across the diocese to find out what the actual level should be for these sort of high level positions within the diocese, and canon ordinary is one of those. So we projected budgeted a $20,000 for potential adjustment in that salary total. So the total salary for 2024, total compensation for 2024 and cost assumed are to be 142,000. 358 versus the 120,033 in 2024. Well, that's why there's an increase in the compensation and cost level for canon of the ordinary. The difference in compensation, just salary and housing, is from 113 to 135. That's a projection we're making on that. Again, we'll finalize that when we get the final numbers and do the final analysis. But we didn't want to leave that out of the budget and it be a surprise a month or two from now. Other areas, we no longer have a chief operating officer position, so there's no budget for that in 2025. Chief financial officer position, as you may have heard over the last month, we've appointed Sarah Page to be the chief financial officer, was doing most of that work anyway. And a similar compensation, this level of compensation would be similar to the canon for the ordinary. We're also doing the same as I explained for canon ordinary, budgeting in an additional $20,000 in projection that we may need to make a market adjustment in compensation in that area. And so the total compensation for chief financial officer, including continuing education and other benefits, would be 139,608 in there. Again, we didn't have that position budgeted in 2024. We're bringing that back in 2025, but we no longer have the chief operating officer position. Another new position for 2025, which already started that, we have a part-time transition ministry officer, and we put in the budget for 2025, a budget to supporting that 33,825 for the transition ministry officer. And I made adjustments to the professional allowance and transportation on par with other similar staff members. Canon for congregations, we recently, I think it was as of this week, right? Just Monday.
Today is her first day in
Oh,
the
first day
office.
today. Okay. Yeah, started a canon for congregations. The salary budgeted for last year and going into 2025 is $90,000. One thing you'll see 25,000 is the congregational support offset. That's because the candidate for this position is also part-time priest supporting one of our other congregations in the diocese, and they'll be supporting, providing support of $25,000 for that particular position, that role. So we're seeing a reduction. The diocese actually is going to be only paying out $75,000, even though we're compensating at $90,000. And we've made the other adjustments in terms of SECA, continuing education, professional allowance, and transportation on par with other positions. And you'll see this year those are a more level across all of the diocesan staff positions, where there were wide variances in 2024 and years in the past. Next one is canon for Hispanic ministry. Compensation is set at $100,000. This came through, we discussed last year when we readjusted the compensations for canons, with a base would be $90,000 for salary and housing. This position already was at $100,000, but when we chose to leave that salary there instead of reducing the salary for canon for Hispanic ministry. We agreed not to do any cost of living increases until the other positions caught up with that compensation at that level. So we kept the compensation the same there. Also made some adjustments in areas for continuing education, professional allowance, and transportation, again to be on par with the other staff members. This one had a much larger budget for several of the other areas of compensation or benefits in there. So we just leveled that out so that they're more on par with, again, market conditions and equity and other similar positions on staff. Last year we budgeted $12,000 for an administrator to help with the Hispanic ministry and support the canon for Hispanic ministries. In 2025, we've taken that position out and have no budget for that position in there. We had some small expenditures in 2024, but we weren't at that $12,000 level. And in the interest of cost savings, Budget and Finance chose to remove that budget for that position. Canon for formation and vocations, that position started early in the year, I believe in February, carrying that forward in 2025 with the 2.5% cost of living increase, and also adjustments made in continuing education, professional allowance, and transportation. Those are, again, the same as the other positions in there. So that's where our costs for canon for formation and vocations. We also have a part-time missioner for lifelong Christian formation. That position started last year in 2020, this year in 2024. We'll continue that on in 2025 with the 2.5% increase, and provide some transportation stipend and also a small continuing education budget for that staff position. Even we didn't have anything budgeted in years past for that. The missioner for youth and young adults, no changes in there in that area in terms of salary, except for the 2.5% increase. And we've also provided continuing education and a transportation allowance for that position, which is now on par with everything else. There was a larger transportation allowance budgeted last year, but we kept that on par with other staff members. The canon for Black ministries, we plan to hire a new person for that position in 2024. We continue with the process. Fully hope to have that position in place by 2025. We have a salary of $90,000 budgeted for that position. No increase because we haven't actually gotten a person in place, so no COLA increase in that area. And the continuing education professional allowance and transportation will be on par with other positions in there. We had budgeted last year for a missioner for Black Ministries. We don't have that budgeted now, but depending on how we finally staff that position for Canon for Black Ministries, we may want to have a part-time position or some budget allowable for some part-time support for the missioner for Black Ministries as we transition to the new Canon for Black Ministries. Missioner for evangelism and social media. This is what I alluded to earlier. We did have a budget last year of $72,000 for that position of salary for that position. 82,266 total budgeted for that position. That position was eliminated earlier this year, and we don't have a budget for that position in 2025. Therefore, we're seeing a savings in the salary compensation for a position there, but as I mentioned earlier, we did increase the program budget for communications to allow us to bring in some specialized consultants where needed to support with communications technology. And likewise, last year's budget for a missioner for communication technology, we've eliminated that position from the budget, which was $35,000. So we'll see some savings between those two positions of well over $100,000, but we did budget about $20,000 more to bring in technical support. There was the Canon for Congregational Development and Mission. That position was phased out again in 2024, and we don't have any budget for that position in 2025. We do have one item that wasn't in the budget. Again, as I mentioned, putting the cost on things that are funded but not necessarily were shown in the operating budget. The Missioner for Emerging Ministries, which in the past had been the Missioner for Haitian Ministries. Diocese is supporting a part of the salary for that position. We proposed a budget of $47,784 for 2025. The role is going to be enhanced to say emerging ministries. The Haitian ministries is one of those emerging ministries, but in other areas of the diocese where there's opportunity for new ministries to be set in place, the position there will be supportive of that and working with communities around new opportunities for mission for the Episcopal Diocese of New Jersey. So we budgeted that position. It's $54,642 is the total amount. We've added some continuing education and transportation in that area, and currently housing is provided by the diocese for that. That's why we don't have salary and housing, because housing is actually being provided by the diocese for the person in that position right now. Other items in the budget are administrative staff. These are those items, those positions that aren't called out as a particular at the canon level or supporting a specific ministry, but we do have administrative support in terms of executive assistant. Pat Hawkins supports generously for our compensation, and also they're supporting the communications too. We don't have a budget for communications position, but there's various people in those administrative roles. That includes the finance office also. So the total budget for that is $355,171, which is a decrease from last year. We've eliminated a couple of positions in that area, and we've moved the cost in some other areas. So we're able to see a reduction in the total budget for administrative staff down to $355. But in consultation with the bishop, I think we have the staff that she believes is sufficient to continue to conduct our diocese businesses. Total for administrative staff, once we bring in employment taxes and the cost for retired clergy chaplain, is at $400,000, $609.
Thank you. Jonathan, if I could just speak very quickly to the difference between this year and next year, is that by the grace of God, we sincerely hope and pray that we are much further, if not fully done, then very close to done on those audits that we were 5 audits behind on in March. We are now, 1 is fully done, 2 are in the very final stages with the auditors, and the remaining 2 are well underway with the work that we have to do on our end to prepare for auditors. So we should be able to not have to spend money on auditors in the same way next year, or on the administrative staff to get things ready for the auditors as we get ourselves caught up. That explains the difference, and my hope is that we actually have a workable team in place. I'm really grateful for and delighted by the work that is offered by the people on staff right now.
All right, thank you. Going down to next, new budget line items around insurance. Health insurance, we see an increase there. That's basically 2 reasons. One is that we've looked at the actual budgeted for what project the actual plans that staff will be in. In the past, it looked like our budgets were focused on the least costly available option versus single versus a full family option. So we looked at existing staff and budgeted in the actual plans they would need, and then we budgeted sort of in the middle area for new staff coming on board. So we see an increase in the budget for health insurance, plus there's an increase in some premiums along in health insurance. So we budget to account for that and any adjustments that may be needed when we bring on new staff in terms of insurance plans. So we think this budget more accurately reflects what we've been spending over the last couple of years on health insurance for given the staff mix we're proposing. So overall, in Dyson staff, in 2024, we had a budget of nearly $2.2 million. We think we can get it down to $2,071,000 in 2025. That includes those potential adjustments for market conditions on a couple of positions, plus the appropriate staffing in the various areas. And as if you've seen along the way, it did reduce a couple of positions that were budgeted for 2024 that we actually never did fill those positions. Next area in the budget is our in support finance, insurance and bonding, and audit. We're on budget this year to spend our audit budget of about $40,000, as Bishop French mentioned. We're hoping to close out in 2024 3 years of audit and start picking up in 2025, catching up with our prior audits. And in a couple of years, we should be right on board and timing with audits where they should be basically finished in the year after within a year of the books closing on that financial year. One other area is our legal budget line item. Our expenditures in there have been significantly more than the $5,000 budgeted over the last few years, primarily due to Title IV expenses associated with that. We had a policy in the past where we were actually paying up to $30,000 on costs for defendants in Title IV cases. In all instances, we were paying that cost. We've changed the canons on that, but we still have significant expenditures in that area. Hopefully in 2025, we'll see some reduction in those expenditures, but the Budget and Finance looked at that $5,000 figure and didn't think it was realistic to think we could keep it that low in 2025. So we increased it to $10,000, and we'll look and see what our actual costs are. But we did reflect that we would double what we had been budgeting in the past, given that we've overrun in that area for the last several years. Getting down to facilities, a couple of cases we're projecting a savings in property maintenance, again, based on actual cost in 2024. So we projected a slight decrease in property maintenance cost, utilities the same, equipment nearly closely the same, furniture. One big change is telephone. We budgeted $12,500 last year. We're actually seeing the cost significantly higher in 2024. Therefore, we budgeted at $18,000 in 2025. A lot of that is some overlapping costs between our telephone providers as we transition from one and move into another one. So we hope to see in 2025 that to get that down to a more reasonable cost. But we budgeted in 18,000 in case there are again overruns in that area. Seeing some slight reductions in office supplies and printing and postage, just because we're doing a lot less mailing of paper and doing a lot more electronic communications. Other areas in there, our hospitality costs, we'll continue to project a decrease in that. Luckily, John Conti, who's our property, who basically the diocesan sexton, he provides catering services too at a very reasonable and effective cost. So we've been able to see some savings in our hospitality costs. One area there's a change, we're projecting a slight increase in IT maintenance support. This is again based on actuals in 2024. We've again transitioning contracts between our IT support customers between one vendor going to another one, and had some higher costs in 2024 in that area. Our leased equipment costs, we're projecting that to be a little bit lower in 2025, but our computer software and supplies, projecting an increase on that. A large portion of that is we've got upgrades to our accounting system so we can be much more efficient and accurate in tracking some of our accounting transactions. And to do that, we had to pay for upgrades in some of the reporting on the base accounting system. So we're budgeting a significantly higher amount for our computer software and supplies in that area. And I don't know if you had any other questions there, sir. I don't know if you had anything else to add in that. I know Sir Page has been working closely on those areas. So if you got any questions, that she probably can address those if anybody had any specific questions about why there are increases in that area. But budget and finance went along with the increase given the fact of the actual costs we're seeing for 2024. Next area is retired clergy, insurance, and widows and orphans health insurance. Those budget line items are staying the same as they were last year. The retired clergy fund and the orphans fund, again, also staying at the same level. All in all, the budget projected for 2025 in terms of expenses is $3,901,076, and that's actually how we got to the number I presented earlier in the income side. Get all the way back up there. Sorry about scrolling there. How we arrived at this 419,204. That basically was the difference between all of our income on these top three lines and what's needed to balance the budget out. So this year we're projecting a drawdown from trustee grants for ministry support overall to be 419,204. Where in 2024 the number was 734,937, and in 2023 the number was around $1.3 million because we had some extraordinary expenses in 2023. So we believe we're moving in the right direction on reducing the gap between our income from Mark's Missions pledges and other designated income to the fund and what's needed to cover our expenditures. We're down, like I say, we're projecting to that 419 figure. Overall, we do reserve the right to make some adjustments. We're still looking at some numbers, even as earlier today. We're looking at some numbers. We might need to make some adjustments in that area, but this is what we're proposing right now. This was voted on by Finance and Budget last Monday, and also presented to Diocesan Council earlier today as our tentative budget for 2025. Again, any adjustments over the next few weeks, we'll present those and then be able to present the finalized version at Diocesan Convention. But we did want to have an opportunity for feedback from the general diocese congregations on the budget being proposed for 2024 as early as possible. So with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions on any specific areas or in general on the budget process.
Thank you for that report. It was really helpful to see it all laid out, and I appreciate your tremendous work along with your committee It's clear that a lot of thought has gone into that, and I'm grateful for the time and for your clear presentation. I don't know that anyone has any questions, but now is your opportunity.
Bishop, is there a way we can get a copy of that so we can look over it?
We're still finalizing some of the numbers. I'd prefer that we not send around a copy until we have the more finalized number. Even looking at that, one thing that wasn't in there was actually I had a conversation with the dean yesterday at the golf day, and the cathedral has agreed to take 145 instead of 150,000, and they will commit to maintaining their full asking. And the reason for that is that they want to support the diocese. So little things like that are coming up. It's good news, but we'd like to get everything as much through the next few days of conversation and work as we can. And then something will be posted on the website when we're at a point where we can do that. And when that happens, we'll try to make sure it goes into Good News in the Garden State as well, or at least a link does. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you to our treasurer, and I'm going to ask now for our chancellor to report on Constitution and canons.
Okay, let me share my screen. So the Standing Committee on Constitution Canons has the report usually divided into various parts, and there is a deadline for submissions of September 1st, and these are the things which were received before then. Part 1 relates to there's a requirement that the committee look at a resolution that's passed by the General Convention every 3 years, supposedly, and if there are any changes to the canons of the diocese that need to result from that. And other than the footnote that because of the rules of the General Convention, the changes in their canons are effective technically on January 1st of the year after the adjournment. But rather than waiting for a year to catch up, we figured we would pass these now. These are not inconsistent with the current Episcopal Church canons, but it will bring us forward into giving more flexibility. And so since the General Convention made changes as to the definitions and functions of intake officers and investigators, which you can see on the screen here, you can say the whole report should be posted on the website shortly, and you can read that in detail there. But the provision of the current diocesan canons relating to intake officers and canons provides for one intake officer who is elected, and no provision for an additional one if we need one, and for one investigator to be appointed by the bishop once a year, and that doesn't give us any flexibility for either having other investigators with different specialties to investigate the facts that are assigned to them by the reference panel. And so these are the two changes that we have proposed to allow for the bishop, with the advice and consent of the Standing Committee, can appoint one or more additional intake officers, and they will only serve until the next convention. And also there's a provision for continuing removal from office and filling of a vacancy by the bishop diocesan with the advice and consent of the Standing Committee. Investigators, on the other hand, can be appointed one or more investigators to serve for the duration of a particular investigation. One of the changes that were made by the General Convention was to allow the church attorney to appoint an investigator if necessary. And so this gives that opportunity for the church attorney in addition to the reference panel. And so the Constitution and Canons Committee recommends the adoption of its implementing resolution. Unless it's removed, it will end up in the consent calendar, which many of you are familiar with. Part 2. Deputies and alternates to the General Convention. For many years, we had a structure whereby the General Convention would meet in one summer, and then the next March we would be electing deputies to go to the next one from our diocese, and the year after that we'd be electing alternates. Because of the language that's in the Constitution, this means that we would not be able to elect deputies until next November, and alternates the year after that. And so what this provision is to amend the Constitution that would allow, and assuming, so the amendment to the Constitution needs to be passed at 2 diocesan conventions. So we can't just pass it at this one. But if we pass it at this one and then reaffirm it on the next one in November 2025, it will then be effective. And the plan is that at that convention and also for any other convention immediately following the adjournment of the general convention, we would elect not only deputies, but also alternates. So we'd be electing, 16 people at one convention. And so this allows for a broader slate of people to be put up for election, because the people that get the top votes get to be deputies, and the ones after that could be alternates. And there's also provision for filling vacancies after that election. And so we recommend that this be passed. Again, there's a lot of minor language changes in here, but that also designates who are going to be the order of precedence, which is important for general convention purposes. And we recommend the adoption of this implementing resolution. Part 3, balloting in diocesan convention, a very minor change. Since we don't have paper ballots that allow for write-in votes, we're deleting the word write-in because there's no reason to have it in there when you do electronic balloting. And so that's a minor change, but it sort of brings us into the 21st century finally. Part 4, Diocesan Youth Council. Because of the changes in diocesan staff, we no longer have a director of youth ministry, so titled, on diocesan staff. And so when the Diocesan Youth Council elects their 3 people who can be deputies to the diocesan convention, the responsibility for certifying that election to the secretary of the convention is going to be a member of diocesan staff with responsibility for the youth ministry without a given specific title. So that is a further change we recommend adopting. Part 5, Mission Renewal Fund. This relates to the sale and conveyance of church properties. And so we have a provision on the disposition of assets of closed churches, which maybe you can recall, going back several diocesan conventions, there were years of discussions about this. Because of the financial difficulties facing the diocese, Bishop French has asked that the canon be amended to give the trustees some flexibility when selling properties of closed churches, to allow some or all of the proceeds to go to the Mission Renewal Fund. And that way we can have some refunding of things that have fallen off of the diocesan income over the past, we don't know how many years, but going back until we finish the audits. And so there's a simple change that the property to be sold in accordance with Section 12, and then Section 12 will then change this. Upon the completion of any sale, the trustees by a majority vote can designate what portion of the proceeds be held to the Mission Renewal Fund, and so advise diocesan council, and the remainder will be held or applied by a majority vote of the trustees, and the diocesan council can request additional amounts to be transferred to the Mission Renewal Fund. So as before, this is in the hands of diocesan council, but it does give some discretion to the trustees to fill other needs of the diocese until those proceeds get used elsewhere for mission purposes. Again, we recommend the adoption of this. Part 6, the Audit Committee. For many years, the Audit Committee canon has not really corresponded with reality because it has a lot of things that the Audit Committee doesn't do, and does not clearly state the kind of things that it actually does do. And so it's been requested to amend this canon and make it function the way it actually should be functioning. And it's a fairly technical thing. I'm not an auditor, but this is what the Audit Committee has approved. And so these changes are being proposed as well. Part 7, administrative assistance for the bishop. Recall we made some changes before about Canon 23 that had language in there that I think arose back from the time of even before Bishop Doss about a 6-month notice for somebody changing administrative assistants when there's a change of bishops. And since for many years now, the terms and tenure for people of diocesan staff is written into their letter of agreement with the bishop. This canon says we don't need to have it in the canons. It will be during those controlled by those agreements instead. And so that affects this change. Again, we recommend the adoption of this. Canon 30, election of convocation deans and secretaries in Part 8. Keith McCoy, as many of you may know, Deacon McCoy, has for many years been advocating for the canons to include deacons where possible, because when a lot of the canons were originally written, deacons were very a rarity in the Episcopal Church and certainly in our diocese, and that is no longer the case. And so at his request, we've examined the process for choosing deans of convocations and for electing them. And although Bishop French has said that it wouldn't be appropriate for a deacon to act as the dean of a convention, but they certainly can serve on a nominating committee for choosing a dean. And so this implements that, and we recommend its adoption. Part 9 relates to the church pension fund. We have, for many years, had a committee of the church pension fund, which largely is just doing communications work between the Episcopal Church and the clergy of our diocese. And this is something which can largely be done by a member of diocesan staff. And so Bishop French has asked that the canon be conformed to comply with that and to set that forth. And so those duties are then given to one or more persons on diocesan staff to carry out those functions. And therefore, we don't have to have one more committee in the diocese of the many that we have that require our bishop to appoint. So that solves that problem. Part 10, persons repelled from Holy Communion have a right to appeal to the bishop, and the canons have previously provided for a committee to investigate any claims that are involved in that appeal. Again, Deacon McCoy has asked that since the language will be changed to allow deacons to be on that commission of inquiry. And so we're provided that we have one member, one priest on that committee, then the bishop had no objection to have deacons or lay people, as currently lay people, to be on that commission. Probably a rare thing to happen, but it's something that's required by the canons of the Episcopal Church to be in diocesan canons, and so we have to provide for that. Part 11 deals with minimum compensation for clergy. This is a technical omission that we left out, standing before Commission on Clerical Compensation in one section. The other change here is proposed to eliminate the specification of an automobile as something that would be part of provincial expenses. If a parish provides an automobile, that's part of it, professional expenses. We don't have to have a separate subsection of the canon to cover that. And my understanding is that hardly any parishes will do that because it's easier to deal with money. But if they have somebody who's working in a car dealership, maybe they do. So also, there are issues that have arisen when housing is supplied in lieu of full mandated cash salary. That particularly happens for part-time clergy. And so this is just adding a provision. So this is something that would have to be approved by the bishop and standing committee on clerical compensation, and review these provisions annually to make sure that they're fair to both the congregation and to the member of the clergy. And this is just we got rid of the term allowance last year, but we missed one deletion in that. And that wraps up the committee's report for Constitution and Canons. We have two of our members that are running for re-election, and we thank everybody who has contributed to the work of the committee, as well as everybody that in the rest of the diocese that has submitted proposals and reviewed them. Any particular questions?
Thank you, Chancellor. That was a comprehensive and beautifully clear report of very complicated matters. I know that some folks will want to read through the specific details, but I'm grateful for the care you and other members of the committee took with this. There will always probably be, if we hit a convention where we don't have some canonical revisions from constitutional canons, then I think something's probably very wrong, because they're a living document. They reflect the life and ministry of the diocese, the congregations, the clergy, and the lay leaders. And this seems to me to be the result of some really careful work to bring us to where we need to be at this time. I thank you for your work. Are there any questions? Anything anyone would like to say at this point? Then I will turn, I think, again, Chancellor, you might be the person speaking to resolutions.
I am.
So-
This is the short report. This is from the Committee on Resolutions. For those not familiar with the work of that committee, it receives proposals for any kind of resolution other than ones that are coming from other diocesan bodies. And we'll propose them, having edited them as to form, having a hearing, at least one hearing, in which the proponents can get some feedback as to what their proposals are in case they are unclear or scandalous or something like that. And they would have an opportunity to amend their proposal. And so this is a preliminary report, which includes the proposals that we received by September 30th, which is the canonical, well, it's a rule of order deadline. And they have been edited as to form. There have been some back and forth with the proposers for the language, and we seem to be happy with it. They seem to be happy with it so far. But there will be a hearing on November 2nd in the small conference room, and you can also register to attend by Zoom, at which you can give feedback to the proposers. They should be there. And after that, the committee will prepare a final report, and it's required under the rules of order to make a recommendation for or against each of the proposals. And if it recommends for or against, those will be included in the consent calendar unless they're pulled off of it. So this year we have two proposals. And you may notice that I changed the numbering scheme to reflect the annual convention number rather than the year number, because we already did all the ones for 2024 back in March. So the first one is on sales of real estate of continuing mission congregations. You'll recall in Constitution and Canons that there was provision to give the trustees of church property some discretion in dealing with sales, proceeds of sales of closed church properties. We also have a situation where we have continuing mission congregations in particular, which have, for example, a rectory that they no longer use, and which has value, and it would, if the sale of which would be useful for them to continue their mission as a mission of the congregation of the diocese. And so that can be sold. And the question is, should the trustees have some discretion as to how to disperse those proceeds? In order to get permission of sale any kind of real property, a congregation needs to have the consent of the bishop and standing committee. That's in state statutes, it's in the Episcopal Church canons. And one of the parts of the process that they should make in applying to the standing committee for that consent is they should explain what should be done with the proceeds. And if they do that, then the trustees of church property, when they sell the property, should follow that plan. If they don't, then they get to invent one so that it's for the benefit of the diocese and of the congregation. Many times we've had sales where the trustees have taken back a purchase money mortgage, and so under that scheme, when the mortgage is amortizations are paid every month, they will pass that through to the congregation, so they have a sort of a continuing stream of income from that. And so this is a resolution to basically give, if it has submitted a plan for proceeds, then the trustee shall disperse proceeds in accordance with that plan. If they have not, then their discretion shall disperse in a way that, in their judgment, best supports the congregation in its efforts to discharge the common call of mission set forth in Canon 47 of the diocese, which is the common call canon of the diocese. And there's a statement in support from Canon Paul Wolfgang, who proposed this. He's a member of the Board of Trustees. He's also happens to be the real property liaison for the standing committee. And so he's familiar with these kinds of processes. So there's a quote for what Canon 47 provides for what people should do. The second proposal is recommending that congregations of the diocese opt in to become subject to the Unemployment Compensation and Temporary Disability Benefits Law. As it happens, churches, because of their churchy nature, are exempted from the state requirement for covering unemployment compensation for their employees. They do have the option, however, to opt in, and it's a fairly small tax. Somebody had suggested maybe we should find out what the calculations are and put that in the statement of support. And then we may have that happen on November 2nd. But this would allow that if you have staff members that get laid off from your congregation, they would at least have unemployment benefits which are standard for most employers for the state. And so this is not a requirement, but it's a recommending that the congregations opt in to do this for unemployment and disability benefits for their employees. And again, there's a statement of support from Reverend Angela Cipolla, who is the proposer of this. And those are the only proposals that we have so far. It is possible that late proposals can be submitted after the September 30th deadline. And if we do receive them before we make the final report, which will be shortly after November 2nd, they can be included in the final report, but they can only be considered by the convention on a 2/3 vote for allowing that late consideration. And that is the report, preliminary report for Committee on Resolutions. If there's any questions about that.
Once again, a very helpful and clear report. Chancellor, I'm grateful for the work of you and the committee and the ways that this has been brought together, and also the fact that you did this work in the middle of a season of changing dates and everyone figuring out partway through when things were supposed to be completed, generally with a realization just after the date that had passed. So well done for all members of the committee, and especially for you for the presentation tonight. I am not certain that we will have any questions, but if we do, I think we're certainly able to respond.
Okay, thank you, Bishop.
Well, thank you. That concludes the stated business for tonight's first pre-convention hearing. Just as we draw this meeting to a close, are there any questions people wished they had asked earlier? Anything that you would like to share at this point before we have a concluding prayer? Okay, well, I'm grateful for all of your work, and we are finishing a little bit before the scheduled time, so that's good news. And thank you for participating and for your care for the diocese. It really, really matters, and I'm glad to see you here. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Loving God, we give you great thanks for the many blessings you have entrusted to us here in the Diocese of New Jersey. We thank you for resources and opportunities to support one another, to support our congregations, our leaders, and our communities. We thank you for rules and processes that give order and shape to our common life. We pray that the work we have done this night will be pleasing to you. We pray for your continued blessings upon us and upon all of our congregations. As we go from this meeting, keep us strong, keep us faithful. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Blessings to you all. Thank you and good night.